Hello and welcome to another AdvancedSkeleton video. In this video, we are gonna take a look at some frequently asked questions. Now here are the questions. Let's start from the beginning. Question 1. Why are my pole vectors not straight? Alright, so to see what's meant here, let's jump into Maya. We'll open AdvancedSkeleton. And we'll bring in the biped fit skeleton template. And before we build it, we'll go ahead and move the knee joint so that the leg becomes nearly completely straight. We can do that by hitting the insert button on the keyboard. And we'll go ahead and move this so that it is nearly straight. And I'll purposely have a very slight angle off to the side to show you what the issue that can arise. And then we hit the Build Advanced Skeleton button. And here we can see we've ended up with pole vectors that are very much pointed outwards. And if we lift up the IK leg, we'll see the knee pointing outwards, which is probably not what we want for the character. So this can easily happen when you have characters that have nearly straight legs. So we'll switch back to the fit skeleton and see that what's actually happening here is that the orientation is ever so slightly pointing out to the side. Now, to help with the visualization of this, when you are in the fitting process, you can turn on the display of the pole vector indicator. Now, once this is on, you can see that the knee is going to end up pointing to the side. And then we'll go ahead and again move that knee to make it point more forwards. Now, by default, that triangle visualizer will not automatically update. If you do move the knee, you need to hit the Update Now button to see that change. However, if you do want that instant feedback, you can go ahead and enable Fit Mode. And when we are in Fit Mode, any changes we make, you can see that it's automatically updating our little indicator triangle. So in other words, it's fine to have a leg that is nearly completely straight. However, the very little angle that's in there, it might just be 1 degree. It needs to have the direction pointing in the direction that you want the pole vector to be. Now we'll turn off the pole vector indicator, and on a related note, we'll show you that we can also turn on the joint orient checkbox here. What that does, it displays the joint orientation values here in the channel box, and we can see that our nearly straight knee here in this case does have a bend of about 4.5 degrees. And now that we have the knee aimed more forwards, we'll go ahead and hit Rebuild Advanced Skeleton. Alright, so back to our list. Next question, how do I control multiple characters? So you might want to have multiple characters in the scene, and you also want to use these animation tools, and you want the list of characters in the scene to appear in this drop-down menu. Now first I'll show you that one of the common issues here, which is not the right way to do it, is to go in here and rename this object called group and give it the name of your character. Now that is definitely not the recommended way to do naming of characters or working with multiple characters. But instead, leave the naming as it is. Then, to give the character its name, we'll do that with namespace and referencing. And that's also how we can do multiple characters. So, say we're about to start our animation. We'll make this a new scene. And here we will go ahead and reference in the characters that we need. So, I'll hit Create Reference. You can specify in manually the namespace you want. My recommendation is that you keep the namespace from the file name. So we'll grab some of our demo characters for this. We'll start with Tuna. Now because the file name here is Tuna, when I reference in, he gets the namespace Tuna, which we can see if we open the outliner. every node has now got the namespace tuner. Also, if we open any of the animation tools, we'll see that the tuner character appears in the drop-down list. And this is the recommended way to give characters names, and also the way to deal with multiple characters, as we can now go ahead and reference in more characters. We'll go ahead and grab Max as well. There we go, we got Tuner and Max in the scene. We can see in the outliner that the characters have their namespaces, and the tools now have the drop-down menu for switching between the characters. Alright, back to our frequently asked question list. And next question, is there a simultaneous FK-IK spine setup? Note this is at times also called a hybrid spine setup. And to see what it is, we'll go ahead and open a rig that has this setup. And essentially it is this, a spine that has IK that allows you to move the top and the bottom as in inverse kinematics. It also have controllers to let you move the spine as a FK spine. And both the controllers are working at the same time. So this is called a hybrid spine, or a FK-IK at the same time spine setup. In AdvancedSkeleton, we can do something very similar to this. However, before we look at the equivalent of this in AdvancedSkeleton, let's take a closer look at some of the limitations of such a setup. The issue that arises with setups such as these is that these FK controllers is not a separate FK change, but rather they're just parent controllers for the IK handle, which we can see if we grab this FK controller, rotate it, the IK controller is moved. So the issue arises if you are moving the IK handle at all. Now this is likely to be done because it is IK, so it's allowing you to move the spine. So if you are to moving it, say we are to move the spine over here. If you at this point try to use the FK controllers, you're starting to get some unpredictable results. And the further you start moving the IK controllers away from their original position, the stranger results you start to get when using the FK controls. So a limitation with a setup such as this is that the FK controllers cannot be used, at least not intuitively used, if the IK controllers have been moved, which is quite a restriction for the IK system. So let's have a look at the spine in AdvancedSkeleton. We'll go ahead and bring in the standard fit skeleton biped template. Select the legs, delete, arms, delete, neck, delete, don't need it, just the spine. And hit build AdvancedSkeleton. And we'll create some polygon boxes here just to help us visualize what the spine is doing. So the AdvancedSkeleton rig does not have by default the FK and IK at the same time set up, but instead it has this blender that allows you to blend from the IK spine or over to the FK spine. Now you can get a very similar setup to the FK-IK hybrid spine just by having an offsetted parent controller to the IK control, which there is by default. Every controller you can pick walk up and get to the IK extra of that controller. So what we could do is place the IK extra controller where we wanted the FK controller, say halfway up the spine, and then put the IK controller itself back to its neutral position. At this point we have a similar effect to the FK-IK hybrid spine, where we can just pick the spine, pick walk up, and we get the FK behavior type controller right here. But this has of course the same limitation as a standard FK-IK hybrid spine. Now also what you can do, instead of having to move the controllers manually like I just did, you can have that taken care of automatically with the switch pivot function. I'll show you how to do that. If we open any of the animation tool here, the selectors or pickers, we'll see that under the anim drop-down menu, there is something called the switch pivot. It just needs an object to show where you want the pivot to be. In this case, we'll create a locator. We'll then just position that locator where we wanted that additional FK type controller to be. So that would be about halfway up the span, about there. And at this point, instead of what I did the first time, which is manually move the extra down and move the controller back, all we got to do is select that locator and the IK controller and say switch pivot. And that has automatically taken care of that for us. So that now, anytime we select this IK controller, just pick walk up to get the IK extra, and it's located right there. But again, as noted before, just a limitation with any FK-IK hybrid spine is once you start moving the IKs away from the original position. If we now get to our hybrid FK controller, just by pick walk up here, we'll see that we're also getting these non-intuitive FK type controls. All right, let's close this one off and get back to our frequently asked question. Next item on the list is, where is the space switching? All right, so let's go ahead and open a standard AdvancedSkeleton biped character. Now, space switching is often referred to the ability to have a certain controller automatically oriented to another controller or to another space. So, for example, we might want this arms to maintain the orientation of the world space, even if we are to rotate the character. So, which would mean that rotating the root like this would automatically maintain the arms to be back in world space orientation. Now, there's a couple of ways of managing this. One is for world space orientation. You can apply what's called a global to the fit skeleton. So switch back to fit skeleton and say we want the effect to be on the shoulder. We'll go ahead into our fit attributes, choose global. And by the way, if you need more information about any of these attributes, just click on the little help image here and you can find the list of all the attributes. And here's the definition for global. So with global selected from the drop-down menu, we'll hit add. We get some new options, which is the default value of global. We might set that to 10, so it's on by default. And there's also possibility of turning on global translation, which we'll leave off for now. And then we'll hit rebuild AdvancedSkeleton. And we can now see that if we are to rotate the root at this point, the arms are maintaining the world space orientation. Now, another thing space switching might refer to is the ability to have certain limbs following other limbs. So, for example, this could mean having the arm automatically follow the head. Let's first put in some stand-in geometry here. And we'll switch to the IK arm and get this guy to essentially put the arm right next to his head. Now, space switching might be referring to the ability to have a controller such as the IK arm here automatically follow if there is any motion on the head. Now, this can be done with the selector tool with the parent function. So what we'll do, we'll select that IK hand and then the FK head and hit add parent. Now we'll see that any motion that we do to the head is automatically also affecting the arm, so that the arm is attached to the head. Note that by default, when doing this, you are using up the channels that are normally used for animation by the constraints. Now, to avoid that, there you can go ahead and use the second parent option called add parent constraint to the extra controller. You can see we still have the function here. And the controller itself is now free to be keyed and animated as you wish, as the constraint has been applied to the extra node, accessed by hitting the up key on the keyboard. Alrighty, back to our list. Next question. How to switch between FK and IK. Okay, so let's go back to build pose for our character. The FK-IK switching does require one of these tools to be running. We'll take this arm as the example. By just using the rig and accessing the channel box, we only have this ability to blend by this FK-IK blend value. Now, a switch does require a lot more than just blending. A switch requires setting of keyframes at your current time and also at one step before to allow a smooth transition between FK and IK or vice versa. So what we'll do is show you the function in the interface. In here, you can do the switch by right-clicking on the FK-IK blue cross and choose switch FK to IK or vice versa in here. Or a shortcut way of doing it is just go under anim and do switch FK IK. And that only requires any of the elements of FK or the IK to be selected. So we could select the FK elbow and go ahead and hit switch FK IK, and it has switched it for the entire limb. Now, if you wanted this function to be more easily accessible, say for example as a shelf button, then all we have to do is open the script editor, and you'll see that the command that we just did is printed here and is called AS auto switch FK IK. We can select that text and middle mouse click and drag and drop that onto the shelf, and we now have a shelf button that will perform that function. So if we now go over here, select this IK control, change the pose, and hit the button, we'll see that it'll seamlessly switch over to FK and maintaining the pose. One more time, change the pose in FK, and hit the button to switch over to IK and maintain the pose. And that's it. There we are. All right, back to our list. How do I add MetaCarpal joints? First, let's see what is MetaCarpal joints. So we can see when we type that into Google that the MetaCarpal joints are the joints in your hand that runs from the palm down to the first of your finger bones. And we can also see that the standard AdvancedSkeleton fit skeleton actually does not have a full MetaCarpal setup. It has a very simplified MetaCarpal setup, except for the thumb. The thumb has a fully articulated joint for its MetaCarpal, because we normally use that joint a lot more. But for the main fingers, this has been simplified down to a single joint that has two of the MetaCarpal functions, and this again is hooked up to the driving system for the arm, and it's driven by the attribute called cup. So this is the simplification that is done by default, and in many rigs this simplification is sufficient and works, but in other ones you might need the full MetaCarpal rig, which we will show you now how to set up. We'll go ahead and make a new scene. Bring in a fit skeleton template. And there's a few ways of doing this. One is you can just plot in the joints yourself if you wanted to. And you can do that with the shortcut here to the add joints function. So you can go ahead, just add in the joints. So we want one joint right about there. Hit enter. Next joint here. And then we could just parent these into the hierarchy. And there we go, we got MetaCarpal bones, and we could at this point just hit build advanced skeleton. But instead I'll show you that because this is a common thing to add MetaCarpal joints, there's actually a single button that will do that. Go ahead, again, bring in the biped fit skeleton template. There is the extra limbs section here. And one of the things that is in this extra limbs is a hand. We'll first do just a hand itself by clean scene, import hand. If we now take a look, you'll see that this hand has the MetaCarpal joints already set up. And if we wanted to integrate that into the standard biped skeleton template, we could just open the biped first and then hit import on the hand. It will tell us that there is a wrist already existing. And what we'll choose here, we'll choose to replace that wrist. And you'll see we now have MetaCarpal joints. So let's go ahead and hit build advanced skeleton. And we'll see that we now have the full finger setup, including controllers for each of the MetaCarpal joints. Now, likewise, for adding individual toes to the feet, this is also a common thing to do. So there's also a single button for, which is the foot import. We'll go ahead and replace that, and that gives us a foot that has all the toes. And the last option here in extra limbs is tail, so we'll bring in one of those as well. Now, note that these are just templates, and if you ever wanted to add any of your own templates, for example, a wing, you could just plot out the joints for a wing, select the joints that you have plotted out the way you like the wing, and hit export. That allows you to write out a file that can become available either here in the extra limbs or in the main drop-down menu, depending where you save it. But just for the sake of showing you one more time how to plot joints, we'll go ahead and give this character wings. And I'll show you that when we hit the create joint tool, one handy function with this tool is if you click on a existing joints, that will highlight and automatically become the parent for your new joints. So we could at this point just go ahead and plot out the wing. For example, something like this. And there we go, we got a character with MetaCarpals and individual toes, a tail, and a wing. And just to demonstrate, let's go ahead and save this wing out as a extra limb. So select the first joint in the limb. We'll hit export, which automatically navigates us into the fit skeletons folder. It's not exactly where we want to be, so we'll step one up, and instead of fit skeletons, we go into fit skeleton limbs. We'll call this wing and hit save. And we can now see that our drop-down menu has a new item called wing. And why not go ahead and build this interesting looking character. And there's our character with the tail, MetaCarpals, 10 toes, 10 fingers. Alright, back to our frequently asked questions. Next item on the list. Why are the IK controllers not aligned with the foot or wrist? Alright, to answer this one, let's go ahead and open a new standard biped fit skeleton. And what's a common issue is that the model is modeled in an A pose, which has the hand going down at a 45-degree angle. Now, for demonstration purpose, let's do the leg too, so it does not align with wall space. We'll have that pointing outwards. And go ahead and build advanced skeleton. And switch that arm over to IK. So we'll see. The issue here is that by default, all IK controllers are built in world space, which means the controllers are exactly aligned to the standard world space coordinates, even when the toes are slightly pointed outwards, like here. Now, it should be noted that there are advantages to having IK controllers being world space oriented. When it comes time to animation and tweaking keyframes, it is very easy to work with keyframes where the single values represents world space values. So, for example, you are animating a character walking forwards in the scene, you're looking and tweaking keys. It then becomes quite intuitive to be looking at a single channel, for example, translate C, representing how far forward you are moving in the scene. Now, the side effect to that obviously is that the rotation is also aligned with world space and does not allow for an easily bending in the axis that the model might be pointed in. So there's ways in here to deal with this. First, we'll hit Toggle Fit Advanced to go back to our fit skeleton. Select our hand, go into the edit menu here. We'll add a fit attribute called IK Local. Now we can open the help image here and we can see some image explanation of what IK Local is going to be doing. We'll, with the hand selected, hit add, and we'll see that we got a new attribute available in the channel box. There are 3 types of IK Local available. The first one, which is the default one, is called Add Control. That's going to add a second IK controller, which is locally oriented. Therefore, you have the best of both worlds. You'll have one controller in world space, another one in the local space. Second option is non-zero, which is basically going to add a IK controller aligned with the limb, but the values are by default not 0. If you do 0 out the values, you will align the limb to the world space. Third option, local orient, which is just orienting it according to the limb with the values of 0. But again, that has some disadvantages as it becomes hard to relate those values to world space. So let's go ahead and build with the first option, Add Control. And we'll just add that attribute to the IK foot as well. And hit Rebuild AdvancedSkeleton. Let's switch over to the IK arm. In fact, let's say that the default for the arms are going to be IK, so I'll set them both to IK and right click on go to build post and hit set build post. That's now always going to switch to IK even on the rebuild. Alright, we'll see that we now have added a control here, so we still have a world space oriented controller for both the arm and the leg, but we also have a second controller with a slightly different color under here that only has its rotation channels available. Now this is going to give us a local orientation of the IK. Now these work together, so you can translate using the first controller and you can apply a rotation on that second controller, which is the locally oriented one. And you can see on the foot now we get that rotation that we were kind of missing before, the ability to rotate the foot up and down as per oriented to the model. So that's the first example of IK Local. Let's take a look at one of the other ones. Again, hit Toggle Fit Advanced. We'll select both the hand and the foot. We'll take the IK Local attribute and hit over to Local Orient and hit Rebuild AdvancedSkeleton. Okay, we'll see that we now have only one controller, and the controller itself is exactly oriented to the limb. So that the translate X now moves this exactly in that direction that the limb was pointing. And we can see that now it becomes a little bit harder to do things that are world oriented. So for example, if we are to move the controller straight up in the scene, that does affect all 3 translation values and therefore can become somewhat more complicated if we are to be working with tweaking keyframe values. And the foot controller too. Now the actual orientation of the icon here is not particularly important. At this point we can just manually pick and orient this the actual shape of the icon to be fitting to the model. Mirror that across. But the transform, as you can see here, is indeed oriented to the limb. And to translate Y in this case, meaning out to the side, because that's the way the toes were pointing. Alright, so that's it for the IK local orientation. The next frequently asked question is, where is the help documentation? Now, the help documentation is not a separate document that you can open and need to navigate to find what you're after. The help is on each step along the way here. These little question mark buttons will open the help image explaining the corresponding section. So, for example, if we wanted to have a look at under the custom controllers, what is the function of creating custom control from softmod, we'll just hit the question mark button and it opens the help image that has text that relates to how to be using this function. And note that some of this will also have a direct link to open the corresponding YouTube tutorial on that goes in depth on the particular subject for the function. Alright, back to our list. Last item on the list here. Are there any tutorials? Yes, there are many, in fact. Now they're all located on YouTube. All you gotta do is go to youtube.com/AdvancedSkeleton. And here is a long list of available tutorials for AdvancedSkeleton. Now, another useful place to check up on the internet about AdvancedSkeleton is our Facebook page, where you might find information about updates and available demo rigs and users sharing videos of their projects that have been rigged with AdvancedSkeleton. Now that's it for this time. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.